Going. We're good to go.
Like you guys screen here, the discussion is over, we can be a little more, concentrated if you guys have questions, you know, and like. Or if I'm saying something you kind of know, just like let me know, let's get past it, we can make this kind of cater to what investors, you guys. So we're here to talk about how to pitch, how artists, creative people like yourselves can use rural media to spread the word about what we do, spread the word about any projects that you why should you like care what I say? So I have, I have about 7 years working at cultural publications with regional Southern focus in particular, 4 different editorial departments, ranging from student media to literary magazines, lifestyle magazines, and for the past 5 years, I have worked as an editor at Country Road Magazine, which is an arts and culture publication that has been produced for 40 years this year. And this is, yeah, it's writing. Okay. Can you tell me? Okay. Should be able to tell me. Do you guys hear me okay? I don't project super loud. Yeah, this is our latest review. It's been, we don't distribute around here, so people not get often, but we are online as well. And we cover the whole state, we cover some Mississippi. We're based out of California, and our distribution is more of like county creatives to sort of new ones. And the last 4 years ago, I've been as an editor. That can be different things for different publications, but in this one, I'm essentially the editor in chief. I'm in charge of and so what I do in my job is I edit, proofreading, also making sure the word makes sense, helping writers get to the best version of their story. I also do a lot of writing for this magazine. I'm a writer by trade, so that's not what editors do, but I really like to. So I can do a lot of it. But what we're going to talk about today is the role that editors have of curating stories for their issues. And this is through newspapers, this is through print magazines, and now also is through digital publications. Even extend this to different levels of blogs. So I know a little less about that. But that curation work includes, I'm in charge of selecting, finalizing the stories that will be included in each issue based on theme, and based on quality, and I decide who writes them, and I decide photographs, illustrate them, and also how they will be laid out. You need to do the form and try to stay on the mark. I already kind of talked a little bit about what you guys do, before I set that up, but thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk to some people about this, because I feel like there is also this connection between, what people think edit, how people think editorial departments work, and actually work, and the reality is that we are always looking for stories, and we are as a culture publication in particular are always hoping to cover the areas artsy. So the today's goals are to empower local creatives like yourself to use area publications as a resource to share news about your work and what you're doing in your projects. Exhibits, performances, books, whatever it is. Before we get into all of that, I did want to take a minute to distinguish sponsored content versus editorial content, because a lot of people don't necessarily know the difference there. If you're on TikTok or something like that, you probably have seen some of this, but sponsored is basically the idea of an advertisement that looks like it's not an advertisement. In magazines, that means it's a store, and it could it looks very much like other stories in the magazine, but this is an example of what an editorial might look like. It looks like an article. Someone who doesn't really know about it might not know that it's sponsored, but it does have to say somewhere that it's sponsored. What this has to do with you is that if you have a marketing budget or you have just a amount of money, like some money to do this, anybody can buy. And it's a great tool. It's a great advertising tool. And then you get to have full control over it. It's maybe to make sure you look so good. You get
Like the skills of an editorial team's writers, but it will be labeled as sponsored. It is different than editorial content, which comes from inside the magazine, which means the magazine's editorial team has decided this is something worth covering on their own accord. And this is more of what you think of when you think of like a magazine story. The source does not have to pay for it, so this is free to you as the artist or as the subject of a story. And the difference here is that the writer and the editor get all the control here. You no longer have control. You do not get to say, like, I don't want you to, like, if they talk about your art in a way that you don't necessarily like, there's a certain amount that you could do about it, but you're not going to be able to like review the article and approve of it, essentially. You know, and publications like ours, we're not out to get anyone. That's true of most, especially when we're talking about art coverage. You know, if there's something that we don't like, we usually just like don't cover it. We're not going to like write a bad review usually or ever about someone's work. For this reason, because it's coming from the editorial department and not from the artist, it is considered like more prestigious than sponsored content. So today we're talking about editorial content. That is the subject that we're going to be focusing on today. So we'll start with how editorial departments work. How do we choose the stories that we include in a magazine? Where do we find our stories? We find our stories from ourselves, which means, you know, our editorial departments tend to try to keep a pulse on the areas, you know, art scenes, music scenes, all of this. And we are on social media, we see things, we take notes, we decide, you know, if we want to cover something or something that we think needs to be covered. We also get pitches from our freelance writers. We have a network of these, and we also get some from freelance writers that we've never worked with before who want to write for the magazine, who have heard about something that they want to write about for us. And they'll send us a pitch, we'll consider it and decide whether or not we want to use it. We also get a lot of press releases from PR agencies and also from, you know, individual or organizations that are sending us press releases that just want us to know about something that's happening. We also get some like tips from people in the community and self-promotion, which we're going to be focusing on the last two for you guys is press releases if you want to write those for yourself or use a PR agency, and sending us information about your own work. Things that we consider when we're making these decisions are timeliness. Is this something that makes sense to talk about right now? We think a lot about our themes. We have a theme every month that we try to kind of work with. Like this month is October. Our theme is myths and legends. We are really looking for stories that kind of fall under that umbrella. That said, we also have an arts issue every year, and we have a performing arts issue. So, and also in that same vein, within every issue, we have a culture department, and we're always looking for something to fill that slot. So we'll talk more about that sort of thing a little bit later on. But other things to consider, is this something really big? Is this something that's going to change the way we think about things, or is this a really big event that's happening in Lafayette or somewhere? We also think a lot about like underlying messages of a story. What does this say about the broader culture, about current events? And we also think a lot about what we've got in the pipeline already. Where does this story fit? So this is my colleague, Alexandra Kennan. She is the arts and entertainment editor at Country Roads Magazine. And she, I'd sent a little query to some other editors in the area for this presentation so that you guys are not just hearing from me. And she always is so great with words, and I just loved this that she wrote, because it really defines how we think about what kind of pitches make us excited. So I'll read it out loud. Pitches that excite me the most tend to be multifaceted and indicate some larger trend or development for that art form and the culture. I think my ideal pitch from an artist would outline some kind of cutting edge project they're working on that in some way ties in with their community or the region at large. I get extra excited when not only does the story say something profound about that particular artist's career and work, but speaks to their field at large. And if there's a timely development or a show or event or exhibit associated with that I can point readers to, that's like a cherry on top and often seals the deal. We love to end a story and be like, and this person has an exhibit next month that we should go to. So how might your work be considered for a story? What are the ways that this can happen? You can be discovered. This is the dream, right? Everyone, like, someone just comes across your work and must cover it. How might you be discovered? You might be discovered in person by an editor or a writer who meets you or comes across your work at festivals, things like this, creative community events that the ACA holds, and connects with it and thinks this is something worth covering. This can also be done like just through general networking organizations. In today's world, being online is huge. Social media with your work is really big. The first thing we do if we meet someone in person and we're interested in their work is we Google them. And not everyone can afford or has time to do a whole website. Social media is great for that. We can scroll through someone's Instagram and see paintings and decide if we love them. If we can find an artist statement somewhere, that's always so helpful. A website is really nice for stuff like that. The other thing is like being easy to reach. I can't tell you how many times we've wanted to cover someone and have no idea how to reach them. And I think people, are tentative about putting like their email address online. I would recommend having an email address for your work or something that people like us can use to get in touch with you if we want to, do something positive, feature it in the magazine. The other way that you can get your work featured in a publication like ours is to take control of the situation and pitch us. On this note, I'm going to just take a minute to reintroduce myself. I am an editor, but I'm also, from Mamou, Louisiana. Right now, we're stressed about my husband in school. Very proud of him, but I spend all my time dreaming up renovations in my house. I'm a dog mom. I'm a cat mom. I'm usually working from the couch without makeup on, taking breaks every 30 minutes to let my dog out to pee. Editors are just people. And I think that there's a lot of anxiety about reaching out to publications. It feels like a bigger deal than it really is. We are actually just people sitting behind computers doing a job. And we aren't as hard to reach as it might seem. We're working on a never-ending project, and often hearing from artists can help us complete that project or make that project better. That said, there is some strategy to this that can help. First thing I would recommend is do your research. Think about what kind of publications you as an artist, what they can benefit you the best as an artist, for the type of art that you do, for the kind of coverage that you're interested in. In general, I would say that artists should be looking at general interest publications. Lifestyle is like, these are kind of key words to look for: lifestyle, arts and culture, tourism. Tourism loves to talk about art. If your work touches on some more specific topics like wildlife conservation or architecture or language or business, there's publications that are dedicated to those niche things that you can find. There's local ones too. And often they're smaller, but they're still doing great work and would probably be thrilled to feature you in some way. How do you know if a publication is a good fit? It's as easy as going to their website, look at their about page, see how they describe themselves, and look for these keywords, see what kind of topics they cover. Do they cover visual arts? Do they cover performing arts? Do they cover literature? And then I recommend going into their archives and actually seeing what they actually cover. Because sometimes they say they cover something and the record's not necessarily there. Like maybe they don't do a great job of actually covering visual art. I'll say that our magazine for a long time said we covered literature, and in the last year we realized we'd only done like 3 book reviews in the last 2 years, and we have actually made an effort to do more of that. But for a long time, people were sending us their books, and we were kind of like, we don't really have a place for this. We don't know. So go look and see what they've been writing about lately, and see. And when I say lately, I mean over the last year, maybe even 2 years. See what they're covering, and how they're covering it. Is it in a way that you want? Maybe they write a lot of really bad reviews of artists. Maybe then it's not worth reaching out to them. I would say that's probably not the case around here, but definitely worth looking into. Also recommend looking at the types of coverage that they do, as far as do they do profiles? Do they do reviews? Do they do cultural commentary? Do they do roundups, 10 artists that Lafayette people need to know about? Do they have a newsletter? Do they include columns? These are all like editorial talk, but kind of exploring these things will give you a better sense of where your art might, or your work might belong in a publication. So ours, for example, we have an artist feature every month. We have a specific space called the column, it's called Perspectives. And every month we're looking for an artist to fill that space. If you kind of know that, then you can be like, okay, maybe one day I can be featured in that. We've actually featured, that was what James featured you in, Philip, was in the Perspectives column. Do they have an art reviewer? Do you want to reach directly out to their art reviewer? Do they have an events calendar? This is something Country Roads has, which is actually the easiest way to get coverage in our magazine. Is we have this massive calendar that covers the whole month. And if you submit your exhibit, or this event was in the calendar, submit it to us and it'll probably most likely be included. This is something that we try to be very comprehensive about. Also look at issue themes. If you know that we have a performing arts issue coming up in 6 months or less, maybe reach out and say, I know that you've got this on the thing, and I know that my work would be a great fit for it. Also, something to consider is scheduling and timeliness. Our magazine's monthly. Some publications are weekly. Some are even more often than that. Some are quarterly. Kind of considering that as far as, if you're trying to cover an exhibit or something, or a book release that you're working on, if you send it to us the week before, our magazine won't be able to cover it. Sooner is you can't send it too soon. You can definitely send it too late. Yeah.
How do you know that you have a edition coming up in 6 months? Like, where
Sure. So on our website, it would be in our media kit, and that's where I would recommend looking at any magazine. That's probably where they would keep it. As far as like, newspapers, that would be more probably departments than themes, but media kits, about pages. You can also, if you just want to ask a question, you can just email the editor and ask for the list of themes. That's also nothing to be scared of.
What you keep in the media?
Could she elaborate? Like, the media kit is usually designed for sales, but it also is a great indicator of who reads our magazine. We have like demographics and stuff in there as well, which can be useful if you're considering which publications to pitch to. Yeah. Yeah, I would say most publications, some people have paywalls now, ours, we still don't. But you know, everything that we publish is on the is online. I would say that's probably true for most places. If not, you can always go to libraries and they'll usually have the like paper archive. But some places are more organized than others. We have like a section where you can click on each issue for the past year and like look at specific issues. You can also just like scroll through endlessly through our recently written articles. Did she? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just asking what I like.
Oh, okay, cool. No, that's great. Okay, so as far as contacting an editor, I have my thoughts on this. I asked these other editors that I work with what they think because I wasn't sure if this is just a me thing, but it's not. Email is the way to go these days. These publications are often run these days by millennials, and millennials don't like to answer the phone. It also is just a way, as you guys have had a minute to read, I'm happy to go through these in detail if y'all prefer, but people, you know, as an editor, we're always often like wearing lots of hats and moving from different tasks. And when we are considering stories, it's something that we like to take some thought and like look at the future issues and kind of, we often don't have an answer right on the spot, and phone calls are hard to navigate some of that. It's also great to be able to refer back to it, to be able to read over what the story idea is, and just to consider where it might fit best in the future issues. I also asked them if they ever liked when someone would do this in person, and almost everyone said no. Alex did note though, and this is true, I would say probably for almost everyone, definitely for me, that you know, if I'm talking to you, if I'm at an event and we're talking and you have something coming up, that's an appropriate time to bring it up. That's fine. You can definitely, we don't want you knocking on our doors, please. But yeah, that's absolutely fine. You can definitely pitch to us in person in those contexts. Like Alex says, I would definitely follow up with an email. This also, I didn't put this in here, but I thought about it later. Social media, I would not recommend pitching stories via social media. We get some people who, you know, drop it into our DMs, something that they're working on, and it's not like a taboo thing at all. It's not a mark against you. It's just that often when we're on our personal social media, we're not or shouldn't be working. And so that requires us to kind of like, that's often on our off hours or, you know, during our lunch break. And it requires us to go back to our computers and refocus. If it's in our inbox, that's where we're thinking about these things. That's the best place for this stuff. Does anybody have any questions? I know I'm probably speaking too quickly. That is a great question. I think I have maybe something on the next slide. No, not quite. We'll come back to that. But yes, you should be able to find the email relatively easily on a contact page on any of these websites. And as far as which editor, that will be different at every publication. I think, you know, look at titles. Alex is our arts and entertainment editor, so it makes sense to pitch to her. However, I will say that lots of those pitches come to me, and that also makes sense. Alex and I work very closely with each other, so it almost doesn't matter for our team. Other like people who have a larger editorial team, such as the Advocate, though, like Timothy Boone did note, like I am the business editor, so I would forward those to the culture editor at the Advocate. So it's definitely better to get them on the first try. Look at those titles closely, but you know, it's hard for me to give super great advice on that because they are just different at every one. If you go straight to the top, it'll probably get seen. If you send it to, you know, Chris is the senior managing editor. I also recommend trying to send it to the intern every now and then. This is just a hack. If you see that there's an intern email, it's often worth your while to include them on the email because they are chomping at the bits to get a story written, and more so than the editor who's got a lot going on. And they might volunteer to do something that no one else feels like doing. You know, like it's just someone who is a little more energized to to write a story. Now, do you need a press release? I think I have another thing with the other editors on the next slide, but there are pros and cons to a press release. Pros is that, it's super professional looking. It gives a sense of this is very organized, thought out, maybe comes from an organization, makes you look, maybe if you're just an individual person who wrote a press release, it sometimes looks like you have more going on than just yourself, which is a bonus sometimes. It can easily be shared. You can, attach that and send it to several different publications at once. There's a reliable format. You don't have to think too hard about it. You can just kind of duplicate the press release format that is out there, which you can Google. They asked me if I would teach you guys how to write a press release, and I will say that I have no experience writing press releases. I have read very many of them, though. And I wouldn't worry about the nitty-gritty of that. I certainly have never looked at a press release and said, like, that's not done right, unless they are missing information. So, like, if it's an exhibit and there's not a date on it, that's a problem. But if you just make sure everything is in there, this is especially well suited for things like exhibits, big events, big announcements. Cons to this is that it does lack some intimacy when an editor sees this in an inbox. We get a lot of press releases. Like I said, when I'm looking at the long list of unread emails and I see press releases, they are not what I'm clicking on first. I'm usually clicking on things that look like they were written for me. I often kind of assume that it's not a project that's necessarily presented for our particular publication. I'm assuming that it's been sent to several other publications, which isn't necessarily bad, but I'm less interested just in the like basic level before I get into it. Also wonder if, even if it is something that we're interested in, are other publications going to be writing the same story? That's a concern that we always kind of think about whenever stuff like that goes out. If you're writing if you're just trying to share your work more generally, I would recommend just a regular email, which we will get here. So this is what some of the other editors said. Christian Mader at The Current, he says that doesn't make any difference to him whether he receives a press release or an email. Chris Turner Neal, he says that he's more inclined to react well to a personal email, but what really matters is the content, which I would definitely agree with. Michaela Beckler at Adore Magazine, she says it depends very much on the pitch, not so much on whether it's a press release or not. Timothy Boone, a casual pitch would be better. Alex, wordy and lovely as always. I'm happy to receive pitches without a press release, but more likely to respond to a casual personal email. So when you're writing a press release or a personal email, the pitch, as a lot of these editors said, is what matters the most. So thinking about what editors are looking for in potential stories, these are some of the questions that we would ask. How is this body of work or this story or this artist different from other work in their genre and style? How is what they are doing new? How is what they are doing old? And by that I mean, is it drawing on classical influences or traditional materials or traditional methodologies in any way that's interesting? Is there a message here that's tied to contemporary issues and conversations? Definitely for us, and I think for most of the local publications here, if they are very centered on this area, that's great. Is there some sort of call to action? Is there something that we're trying to get people to do? Are we getting them to donate? Are we getting them to attend some upcoming event? Did you have a question, Anna? Okay. Is there something interesting about the way they're doing this? Are they going to uncharted territory? Are they using really old materials? Are they offering a tribute to some person or some idea, something significant? And what are the questions that they are seeking to answer? And is this investigative? Is this something that would be thought-provoking for our readers? Pro tips here, when you're thinking about these things, more research. See if the publication does have a history of publishing stories about the work like yours. Go read those articles and see what the writer of those stories drew out. Like, what are the things that they thought were the most interesting thing about that photographer's work or that painter's work? Where did they find the story? And think about that in relation to your work and how it might apply, or how your work might be like the total opposite of that, but how you can angle those things into a story. We understand that, like, we are the writers and the editors, not you guys. So we're not I'm not asking you to go and do something, I'm not asking you guys to write a novel about your work, but just keeping these things in mind can really help your pitch stand out amongst all the others. I'd also advise you to ask your friends and your fans what are the most interesting things that they find about your work. And that's always super helpful. What else to include in an email, in a pitch to us? Definitely, address the editor by their name if you can find it, which I think usually you should be able to. For us, like, my name is in my email address. So, and it could be their first name, it doesn't have to be super formal. If you're familiar with the publication, if you've read some of the stories, it's always, flattery works. Let us know if you liked something. You definitely don't have to be, with that, I'll say, if you haven't been subscribing to this magazine for like 10 years, we don't expect everyone to have been. That's not really the point. But we do appreciate when it's evident that the person pitching us has put some thought into this and has an idea of what we're doing and what we're covering. Always make sure that you've got every date, every relevant date, every relevant time, every relevant link. If you have examples of your work that you can share via email, please do attach it. And the best way to contact you, whether that be email or phone, just make sure that's included. It doesn't have to be formal. Like, the tone does not have to be formal. It's totally okay to be casual, playful, fun, something like that. But, just keep it professional. Don't be making jabs on an editor that you don't know very well or anything like that. Definitely be courteous. And proofread it. Like I said, you guys are not editors. It's okay if there are mistakes. It's not the end of the world. But take a second to just make it as clean as it can be. Do's: be gracious, be kind. Like I said, we are just people doing a job. And it's incredible, but that really does stand out. It's a lot of people don't take the time, or the opposite of that, are not gracious and kind. And it actually stands out a whole lot if you just kind of get that across in your email. Indicate if you're familiar with the magazine. If you can recommend, if you are familiar enough with the magazine to say, I know that you do a monthly column on artists and I'm interested in being part of that, that's super attractive to us. If you don't hear from us after a week or two, I will say, people who are emailing me this week will not hear from me until next week. Our schedules get backed up. This week is our production week. All of my energy is going towards getting our October issue out. That can happen, and that doesn't mean that they're ignoring you. It's totally fine to follow up after maybe a week or two. Do that also graciously and kindly, please. Great to include the word pitch in your subject line, along with some sort of very clear, snappy description of what you do. Pitch, if a pitch is in a subject line, my eye goes to it immediately as an editor, and Chris Turner-Neal told me that his does as well. And so that's a great way to just kind of make sure that your thing gets noticed. We recently got one that I thought was a good example. Pitch: New Orleans memoir about art forger. That's about the Clementine Hunter art forgers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but we do have a story coming out about that. So they got our attention. Don't be pushy or presumptuous. We giggled recently about someone who sent us, a photograph of himself and said, this should be on the cover, perfectly seriously. And not that, his story is actually probably interesting. We might cover it, but we kind of laughed at him because we were like, that is not how this works. So don't assume that you know how the magazine operates. Send us your work and offer us invite us to explore it and to see how it best works for our publication. You do not have to write a novel. In fact, it's better if you don't. Keep it relatively short. About 500 words is probably longer than it even has to be, but I wouldn't go over that. Do not recommend a writer. That's kind of can be a red flag. That could be kind of seen as, you know, my buddy would love to write about me and I know that he'll say good things, you know. It's usually best to let us handle that. Also, don't submit an article you've already written about yourself. And I say that just to save you time because we won't be publishing that. We won't publish an article that you wrote about yourself. We want to have a journalist, you know, interview you and do the whole process. And don't be sloppy. Like I said, just look over it and make sure it's all clean. Is everybody good? Do you, anybody have any questions at this point? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I don't think there's really a limit. I would definitely, if you have some that you're especially proud of, like, you know, include those. And then if you have any sort of website or Instagram or anything that has more, you can direct us to that to look at more of them. That's definitely always kind of saves us another step of just having to go, you know, search you down. It's right in front of us, which is always great.
Even though like you don't want to submit items you've written yourself, is it okay to submit articles that have been written about them previously?
Yes, so that's a great question. If you've been featured in other publications before, yeah, absolutely great to share those. It's the same reason you would share, you know, if we wrote an article about you, we hope you would share it on your website, and it just kind of shows that other people have been interested in you and have taken some approach to exploring your work that we should, you know, consider. That's totally great. And even if it hasn't been like published, that's okay too, as long as like the writer understands that that's not what's going to end up in our magazine. We're going to do it differently. Okay, so I made this up. This is not something, it's based on a lot of things that we've gotten. I didn't want to include someone's actual pitch in here, but so this is like an example of just a very basic pitch that would be great for us, you know, like somebody who comes in, they say, this is my name, this is what I do, this is where I'm from, we'd love to know where you're from. And they are kind of giving a shout out to something that they've done that they've read the magazine recently. They note that they're familiar with a place where their work might fit. Then they spend this little paragraph talking about what elements of their work we might find interesting, which includes, excuse me, I might need to get a little water. Oh, it just caught me. So sorry, y'all. But yeah, things that like themes in their work and noting what, you know, we've done recently about someone that feels like in the same vein of how we might cover them. And then they attached 3 examples at the bottom with their website and their artist statement. We love to read artist statements. We love to hear, you know, how an artist is thinking about their body of work, you know, apart from how it might be covered in our magazine. And then they include their contact information. Sincerely, Brianna. So this is very simple. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but this is like just a very basic example of what would work for us. Does anybody have questions about this?
You're welcome to start.
I think it's resolving now. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, it just like caught me.
Yeah.
Used to happen to me all the time in like high school, like in the middle of history class. Yeah. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions about this? I don't know. Oh, thank you so much. Look at this, how cute. Okay.
I don't think it's probably a question, but I see that you're mentioning the part about coverage on the article and things there, that you can mention somebody else and how your work might be similar to that.
Yeah. Or if, you know, you could say like, I noticed that you were interested in this. and my work has some of the same things. So I thought you might be interested in my work. Yeah, that's a great way to lead in. Is she good? Yeah, okay. Cool. We will go on. So like, what if you do all of this? The editor still doesn't want to write about you. This doesn't mean, this is not a statement on the quality of your work. These are some reasons that an editor might pass. They, they are operating on a budget and they're operating on a schedule, and there's no room. We're at the end of the year right now, and our budget's getting tight. So we're being very selective about stories that we're, choosing until the end of the year. They have recently run a story just like yours. If you do watercolors, and we just did a story about a watercolor, if you're watercolors from Lafayette who paints landscapes and you do the exact same thing, we probably won't want to do, 2 back to back. An editor, yeah, go for it. You have a question?
I'm curious, I see a discrepancy between this here.
Oh, sure. I totally could have done that.
Because in the previous pitch, we're talking about how I was, my work is sort of reminiscent of similar to this work, which was published.
Sure, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I was saying.
Well, and sure. So the difference, I'll explain that. That's about timing. So that's more about timing. So if we've done something that, that indicates that we're interested in this sort of work, certainly doesn't mean we'll never cover it again. But if we just covered it within like maybe the last 2 issues, we probably won't want to do it right away. Now, that said, you're right. I probably shouldn't have included that because we are always scheduling ahead of time. So we would maybe not want to publish something like in this issue, but we could schedule it later on. If we've recently run several stories that are around the same theme, though, that can be a reason. I will say that doesn't happen as often as befits putting this on the list. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Another reason is just like, maybe I loved the story, but my publisher, James Fox-Smith, didn't, and he doesn't want to run it. And that happens all the time, especially in bigger editorial departments than like ours. Like we have 3 people. So that's a little less often, but at the Advocate, there's a lot of opinions in the room, and a lot of people who are superior to others and might have power to veto. The themes in your artwork might not reflect the values of the publication. This is, or the editor. Typically a good editor won't let their personal, politics or, feelings. It depends what it is very much, but if your work involves a lot about abortion, probably don't pitch a Catholic magazine, stuff like that, keeping those things in mind. We tend to be very touchy about outright political stuff, but we find ways to address, it's hard to avoid politics these days. So that's not a reason not to pitch, but it could be a reason that we ultimately decide not to cover something. The balancing act ongoing about trying to make sure that we're covering each region relatively equally, as far as demographics equally, themes, and we definitely don't always get that right, but we're always performing this balancing act, and sometimes stories get dropped on the cutting room floor because they might not, fit into where we are at that moment. Something more timely or urgent took place. There's only so many spots in every issue. And sometimes we get a whole lot of pitches and we just can't fit everything in. And sometimes it just doesn't fit into where we're at and what we're thinking and what we're envisioning for the future issues that we're working on. And will an editor tell you all of this? Hopefully, will they give you a real reason? Hopefully so. They might not, though. They might not give you a real reason, and that really sucks. But that is the reality of the game. What if they are running a story on you, though? Enjoy it. Be kind and gracious as always. Just be cooperative, provide as much information as you can. They're going to want to do an interview. If you have, secondary sources that might be able to comment on your work, if you have a mentor or students or a production manager or gallery owner that might be able to speak, as an outside perspective on your work, that's always great to share. If you have any concerns, please say so. If you are doing an interview and you say something and you want that off the record, just say so immediately. Usually, you know, like I said, we're not out to get anyone. If someone comes back to us later and says, I said this in the interview and I really would appreciate if you don't publish it, like we're gonna work with you on that. Like we're not trying to hurt anyone. Yeah.
How does one participate in a fact check?
Yes. So different publications do this differently. The way that I've worked at two publications that, so I worked at the Oxford American in Little Rock, and I was the fact checker. And so I brought that to Country Roads. And so we have a pretty rigorous fact check, which involves not letting a source see the article until it's published. But what we do is we go through every single fact in the article that's, you know, checkable. And if we can, you know, verify it online or in archives or something, we'll do that. But often it's from an interview. So we are asking the artists to confirm things that they've said. We usually won't like give you your exact quote, but we'll, you know, if you said, I've been doing this since I was 14 years old, we'll ask like, when did you start painting? You know, was when you were 14 years old, and we will check, we'll work through that with you because we don't want you to have full control over the article, but we definitely want to make sure we get everything right. So that's how we operate. I do not know that that's true for everywhere, but I know that that is becoming, you know, people talk about fact checking a lot these days. So I think that that's becoming a bigger concern at publications. Now, do we always get it right? No. So if we've missed something and it goes out onto the internet and in print, and it's wrong, please let us know immediately, and we will do whatever we can to change it. Often if it's in print and it's like already out, there's not anything we can do, but we can definitely change it online. But for the more fun side of that, once it's published, enjoy, please share it everywhere. We want to spread it around. And yeah, is that the last slide? Yes, so that is the last slide. So now I'll open the floor to questions about any of this. If there's anything that I didn't touch on that you have questions on, or if anything you'd like me to expand on, I'd be happy to do so.
Can you talk a little more about like what a press release looks like in comparison to a pitch? Like,
Sure. So the main difference, I'm like trying to decide if I should pull up my inbox right now. You know, a press release like will have like I think I will. I'm not scared. It's fine. Oh, that's fine. That's even better. So like, see my inbox right now, guys. Yeah, so like this is a press release, right? A press release will have like usually some sort of branding at the top. They'll have media advisory. They'll have these like who, what, when, where. And they don't always look like this. Like they look differently. This is usually something that happens though. The like about section at the bottom. Like if you're an artist and you have an exhibit, this would work in that format. So you could do who, what, where, when, where, why, and then you could put about whoever you are and your work. Maybe your like artist statement goes there. And there's links usually inserted into these. So yeah, that's like what a press release will look like. And a regular email is just, you know, a straight up email and email to me directly usually. Or another thing, somebody asked about how to find the emails. If you can't actually find the editor's email, almost always if you just put editor at the name of the publication.com, that you'll reach them. Because like if you reach editor at countryroadsmag.com, it comes to me. But you should be able to find my email on the website. So yeah. Anything else?
Like when you put it new and people don't really know much about you. I mean, yes, I have social media, but
Sure.
no one knows who I am. Like,
Yeah.
Is that something that's less interesting for an editor to look at, or how do you as an up-and-comer
Sure.
artist get yourself, you know, like
Yeah.
get yourself well enough to where you are interested in it? I mean, versus somebody like him who's well established.
Sure.
It's two different things. It's easier to find, you know, all of the work he's done.
Yes.
Yeah, how does that work? How does one navigate that?
Yeah, I think that it's never too early to share your work with an editor. I would say, yeah, sometimes it kind of depends on the work and how much of it they have and if all the things that we've already talked about. But if they don't want to cover it yet, that's something else that I should have put in here. Build a relationship with the editor. Say, I want to let you know that I'm out here and I'm doing this. And whether you have the space for me now or not, if you follow up every, 6 months or something, and they're going to go follow you on Instagram probably. And then as you grow, or if you have an exhibit and we could put it in our calendar, those relationships really pay off. We've like really enjoyed following artist journeys and usually end up writing about most of them, so also sometimes it's a great pitch is saying like, I'm just getting started and that's part of your story. You know what I mean? If you angle that right, magazines love to be the first to write about someone. That's like very exciting. So
Playing the long game.
yeah, the long game's worth it. It just depends on the situation, but yeah. If we could be the first to report on some upcoming artists, that's super exciting for us. We love to do that.
To go along with that, I guess, I know in the description for coming here, you said artists are invited to send their page for
Yes.
critique. I didn't do that, but is it okay to still do that after?
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. No, please do. I'd be happy to, if any of you want to like do that and send a pitch to me, and I'd be happy to like I'll email you back and let you know what I think. That's totally doable. Yes.
Question for you, we all as artists and creative people, we all sort of also create a social media presence.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there a relationship between what we put there and the whole business of trying to query other publications for work? I mean, anyway, I'll stop with the question. Go ahead.
No. So are you asking like, do you think that we come across it and that like inspired, like kind of the be discovered thing? Because that certainly happens. If we see artists sharing someone else's work and we're like, oh, that's interesting, that could totally end up on our like future stories board for sure. Is that what you were asking, or was it?
I don't know. I think very good point, because I'm not sure what my question is.
Are you almost asking about the brand and story part of it, or?
I'm just, I know I create something on social media.
Yeah.
And when something's going on, I will, or whatever. And so, for example, I did a photograph here recently of there's a famous bread loaf being found.
Yeah, I did. Yes.
And I shot it from the air, and behind it was a cemetery that no one had ever seen. And it started to get thousands of likes, this kind of thing, and the Advocate saw that.
Oh yeah, see that
story about it.
That's a great example. Yeah.
And how do they figure that out? I don't know, but I'm just wondering, is social media a way to a conduit
For sure.
approaching editorial?
Yeah, I think it can be an indirect way. I wouldn't ever just assume that like the editor saw it. We often do, I would say. Like we're pretty, like I think I'm friends with you on Facebook. Like I think that I'm friends with you on Facebook. Like we try to stay in the circles of the artists, especially like established ones and the communities. But that doesn't mean, we have 2 editors, so things get lost. I can't believe we missed that event last Saturday. Like I can't believe we didn't know about that. That totally slipped between the cracks somehow, and that's all over social media. So I think that it's always safe to reach out to make sure that we've seen it and that we're in the know about what's going on for sure.
Here online, Leah's asking, do you have any tips for guest posting? When the artist writes the article, maybe something like 5 things I would consider before putting my 9 to 5.
Sure. Yeah, that would be more in the category of pitching as a writer, which is a different conversation that I'd be happy to do a whole nother presentation on. that though, you know, the actual strategy is actually very similar as far as emailing us and describing the story that you want to write. That's more about us wanting to hire you to write a story versus like self-promotion. Yes. And I'll just say, as a poet, we, like I said, we've been just recently trying to ramp up our coverage there and fill in some gaps, especially because we feel like there isn't a lot of literature coverage at all in our region at publications. And so that is something where I would send your work, you know, that's like a funny place because we work with a lot of writers and it would be more of like it would be, we don't publish a lot of poetry, so it would be like asking us to do something we don't normally do, but that doesn't mean, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. We recently published some poetry. I guess I'm just trying to say for our particular situation, that's something that's a hole we're trying to fill that people probably don't know about. So I'm encouraging you to submit your work to us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And we just started having a book reviewer work for us every other month to feature local publications and stuff. So that's something we are working on. Yeah. Anything else, guys? Thank y'all. Thank y'all for being here. I hope to be hearing from all of you. Okay. Yeah, we're hoping to do that for sure. So yeah, we're always looking for new writers. That is for sure. I need to be writing less. So yeah, and like I said, keeping an eye on like, oh, I wanted to include you guys for you guys a list of that's our magazine, y'all. Sorry, I'm gonna close this. I know, I should.
No, we are kindred spirits. When I tell you, I have over 700 tabs open on my phone. I have about 55,000 unread emails. I didn't just call it.
Oh, it's the worst.
And my desktop is literally nothing but